Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Fuster. I am an associate professor in public health nutrition here in the Department of Social, Behavioral, and Population Sciences at the Tulane Celia Scott Weatherhead School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. Yes, new name. Really welcome to this important symposium. We are so glad to see you here in person, and welcome to those of you joining us via Zoom. Because again, we appreciate your time and commitment to really tackling the critical challenges we'll be discussing today. The focus of the symposium will be at the intersection of climate change, urban green infrastructure, and our food system. The food agriculture and land use sector play a pivotal role in addressing the climate crisis. Here in New Orleans, and I mean, not only here, like, again, many people in Florida are going right now through the consequences of this continuing climate crisis. But here in New Orleans, where climate impacts are particularly severe, integrating green infrastructure into an urban landscape, if we think about the area that we're sitting right now, is really important and can make a big difference. And at the same time, we also have the opportunity to go further by incorporating food productive strategies that not only improve access to fresh, healthy food, but can also help foster a sense of community like only food can do. Food has that magical aspect to it. And I want to really stress as we open the symposium the word opportunity, because I know sometimes we get bogged down about the why nots. And I really want to invite you today to dream with us and think about the why yes, and how this can actually happen, because it can happen, really. This conversation is part of our school commitment to address climate change in the Gulf South, one of the strategic growth areas identified by our school dean, Dr. Thomas LaViste. And I am deeply grateful to Dean LaViste for his support and making really this event possible. So thank you so much. And also his commitment to this important topic and really that intersection with health equity. That's something too that we're really thinking about here. I also want to take the time to thank Megan Harrington. Say hi. Greta Kappelman. Oh, there you are. And Dr. Kelia O'Malley, because you really ran with this. So thank you so much for all of this that you have been doing. And also, of course, as you see here, this event is also the result of a lot of these different collaborations. It is supported through the Climate Change and Health in the Gulf South initiative. And we also have the support of the Tulane Maternal and Child Nutrition Leadership Program, the Louisiana Collaborative for Diversity in Nutrition, and other collaborators from the School of Architecture and the Taylor Center for Social Innovation, which I will say that, remember, tomorrow we have this follow-up event that they're really supporting that to bring the conversation from today, trying to push it more towards action. We have a full agenda today. I know we might be a little bit ambitious with this. We actually began our day with a tour of the Sewage and Water Board rooftop. So thank you, Grace, for having us. And we're going to start today with our official welcomes by Dean LaViste and Catherine, that doing this joint welcome between our school and the School of Architecture. And then we'll have a panel discussion introduced by Dr. Diego Rose, bringing together, as you can see, these amazing community organizations at the intersection of green infrastructure and food production in the city. And after the panel, we'll have time for Q&A, and then we have our keynote speaker, which I'm very excited about, Dr. Fiona Udall. She's joining us from Toronto Metropolitan University to show us, how can this be possible, and give us her amazing experience there in Toronto, and and the things that she has been learning as we have been interacting now, like 24 hours since you landed here. Yes. So again, thank you so much. And one more thing, do stay till the end. We have this beautiful, as you may have seen as you came in, this opening reception that we're so excited about. I apologize for those in Zoom that will miss it. If you are local, you can still pass by and see it after today. So with that, I'll cede the stage to Dr. Laviste. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Melissa, and your team for hosting such an important event. Oh, okay. Oh, that picture again. That's, just returned from a tour of the green roof at the Sewage and Water Board. It really is inspirational. I'm really excited about the possibility that we'll be able to install something similar to that here at our school that we can incorporate into not only the research, but also academic programming. And I think it'd be a really unique project for us. So I welcome you all here today for the important conversations with local partners and researchers. As we begin, I wanted to ground us in the work that we're here to address at the Celia Scott Weatherhead School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine. That is a mouthful to say, but we're so delighted to be able to say that. New Orleans is situated in the American South, historically and presently the epicenter for inequalities in our nation. This is a region that sees adverse health outcomes, inequalities in life expectancy, social service, safety net gaps for vulnerable or marginalized populations. These are many of the outcomes that we aim to improve in the health sciences, and they can be found here, right in our front yard. If we are to make our world more equitable, we must include and center the places and communities subjected to the largest inequalities. We are fortunate at the Celia Scott Weatherhead School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine to work alongside many communities of innovation, which will be highlighted by our speakers here today. New Orleans holds its own cultural wisdom, passing knowledge from generations to generations, boasting unique and expressive customs and traditions. This culture of resiliency and solidarity is rooted in the history of interactions among indigenous peoples that call this land Belbacha, the land of many tongues. These are people who cared for the land and are still at the forefront of the fight against the exploitation of natural resources, and whose communities often bear the brunt of cultural change, of climate change. We are home to an African diaspora, of which knowledge and culture are iconic in our city, but still carry the weight of inequalities born out of racism and segregation. This city has seen the arrival of refugees from Asia, the Middle East, Central Africa, and Arcadia, migrant workers from Central America and Mexico, as well as indentured servants from Europe and the Jewish community. All of these communities have unique ways of knowing that have contributed to building the culture of this city. I'm thrilled to see this symposium series become a reality, because this gathering and those to come are the conversations that need to be happening today. Our location in one of the world's most environmentally vulnerable regions gives us a unique perspective on one of the most pressing issues of our time, the Earth's rapidly changing climate. It is important for our school to take the lead in advancing research around climate change impacts through the lens of public health. And it's through events like this one that we bring together diverse disciplines and people to build momentum for meaningful and impactful change for the health of our communities. While the task is formidable, as a leading research institution on the front lines of climate disruption, we are uniquely suited to bring all disciplines to the table and address these global challenges from here in New Orleans. I want to now turn it over to one of those interdisciplinary partners, Dr. Catherine Skerall. Dr. Skerall is a managing professor of practice at the Tulane School of Architecture. She is an architect and urbanist whose research and practice crosses many disciplinary areas, including urban design, planning, and participatory research methods. Catherine also serves as the Managing Director of the Center on Climate Change and Urbanism, working to advance a more holistic understanding of the role of the built environment in causing, mitigating, and adapting to climate change. Thank you for being here today. And Catherine, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, do I need to, sorry, advance the slides? Welcome, everyone. My name is Catherine Skirl, as I was just introduced. And on behalf of the Tulane School of Architecture, I'm delighted to welcome you to this symposium. As we just said, it's events like these which bring leaders, practitioners, researchers, educators, and students from across disciplines together that yield some of the most creative and inspiring ideas for how we might tackle complicated problems. Dialogues that intersect public health and the built environment are not new. For generations, urban planners and designers have wrestled with problems of health in cities. And in fact, some of the earliest treatises on urban design began with concerns for public health: the adequate flow of air, securing clean sources of water, managing waste, accessing and storing sufficient supplies of food and other resources. These were fundamental considerations for building the earliest cities. Concerns about and understanding and mitigating diseases in urban areas like cholera and yellow fever led to 19th century advancements in both epidemiology and urban infrastructure. And early thinking about the important relationships between green spaces, social and environmental health produced city parks, tree-lined boulevards, public recreational facilities, and playgrounds within our growing cities in the 20th century. And of course, our zoning and building codes were implemented to help us mitigate risks and health hazards associated with fire or exposure to air pollution, lack of sunlight, overcrowding, and on. Today, it continues to be difficult to talk about urban planning without teaching and touching on its implications for human and environmental health. Enhancing walkability, mitigating heat island impacts, transforming urban areas from gray to green, and installing rain gardens or purple pipe irrigation systems. All of these are active discussions in our field. And as we know, our topic today is that food is at the heart of our cities, and especially our hometown of New Orleans. It's what brings us together daily around the lunch counter and dinner table, and it's what drives many of our festivals and celebrations. Unfortunately, planning for the production of food within cities has been problematic. Most agricultural activities are relegated to rural areas, and food is, for the most part, trucked in, which of course exacerbates negative environmental impacts. And in many cases, our zoning codes prohibit urban ag, even at small and middle scales. Farms for vegetable production and livestock are problematic for density reasons or considered a nuisance because they produce odors and waste. Yet urban ag has also been vital during times of struggle and war. We can point to victory gardens during World War II or guerrilla gardens and community gardening projects during the 1970s and forward post-Katrina that have really helped to alleviate hunger, improve access to fresh produce, and also bring folks together. Increasingly, we're seeing cities change their policies and codes to allow and even incentivize things like backyard chickens, bees, and front yard gardens within residential areas. So even though I practice and teach within a discipline, it becomes increasingly clear to me that we need to be working across and thinking beyond these boundaries. This will help us both understand complex problems and imagine new futures. The School of Architecture has a history of working in this way, linking architecture, planning, heritage, design, and social innovation, and we are continuing to expand our expertise. I'm just going to highlight a handful of our past and current initiatives that center on green infrastructure, food, and climate resilience. The first are a series of projects by the Albert and Tina Small Center for Collaborative Design, their planning and design build studios, which have produced projects like the pavilion for the Sugar Roots Farm featured in this slide, work on the Refresh project with broad community connections, the Grodat Youth Farm in New Orleans City Park, and many of our project partners are here today, so we'll be hearing more about their work. The New Orleans Public Space Project is a design studio led by our dean, Iñaki Alday, and visiting professor Sean Fowler, which recently won a shortlist award for the Grow Water Prize at the 2024 World Architectural Festival. This design studio imagined adaptations to New Orleans city streets, transforming them from vehicle-first infrastructure into multi-purpose urban amenities. The School of Architecture is also currently launching a new master's degree in landscape architecture and engineering, which we will begin in the fall of 2026. So if anyone's out there interested in this dual degree between the School of Architecture and Engineering, please come and join us. We also just launched this week a Center on Climate Change and Urbanism, and where we'll be creating a forum for faculty and students to connect and develop research projects related to climate change and the built environment. You can connect with us at architecture.tulane.edu/climate. And last but not least, I want to make a small plug for our upcoming symposium on the Gulf Coast Climate Futures Project, which will be hosted on November 1st and 2nd. So I hope I can see many of you there to continue these conversations as we go forward. And before I leave the podium, just one more thought. Our role in this moment as researchers, practitioners, students, and community leaders is more critical than ever. Of course, we're facing a significant uphill battle to overcome these negative legacies of vehicle-first infrastructure, zoning, and redlining, which have produced entrenched social inequalities that manifest in both health disparities and environmental impacts. We are experiencing a climate crisis that's yielding increasingly intense impacts and leaves nobody untouched. And we know that our most vulnerable are feeling the most impacts. These challenges seem so large and intractable, yet we are demonstrating through this symposium there are also alternatives to be explored, and that these alternatives are possible. It's possible to develop rooftop gardens. It's possible to remake zoning practices and retrofit infrastructure. It's possible to build community gardens. All of these are possible, which means it's possible for a socially and environmentally sustainable future to come true. And it's our work in this space to help make that happen. So again, a big thank you and welcome. I appreciate you all being here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Diego Rose.
Thank you, Catherine. That was great. And thanks to everybody for coming today. I want to start by reminding you of the title of our symposium, Green Infrastructure, Food Systems, and Building Climate Resilience in New Orleans. My name is Diego Rose. I'm professor and director of Tulane Nutrition. I also want to do a shout out to our dean, Thomas Levis, for having the foresight to develop a whole strategic priority around climate and health. And part of what I wanted to do in my few minutes is to situate this symposium within that larger sphere of climate and health. And I want to do that by first circling it on the top of our flyer, but then talking about the links between climate and health. Now, I start with climate and environmental change. If you have global warming, you're going to have environmental change. And we start with that box, and to see the connection between that and health outcomes is pretty straightforward. You have global warming, it's hotter temperatures, people die of heat strokes, right? It's even more in front of us than that. Hurricane Milton today, last night, has been lashing Florida. There, unfortunately, are going to be lots of deaths from that. That's a direct result of global warming. This storm went from a tropical storm to a Cat 5 in less than 24 hours, the only one that has ever done that before. And that is because of the hot waters of the Gulf Stream due to global warming. But there are other ways that climate change directly affects health outcomes. And we can think about them as being a lot that are studied in this building. When you have warmer temperatures, you have more bugs and they live longer. Whether we're talking about microscopic bugs or things that fly around and bite you, there's going to be more of them. They're going to live longer. They're going to bite you more frequently. And if you need an iconic example of that, think of Anthony Fauci, who got West Nile virus this summer living up in Maryland. Did it exist in Maryland before he got bit? Yes, but the probability of him getting it is a lot more today because of global warming. So I think those connections between climate and environmental change and health outcomes are pretty clear. There's lots more that I could describe along that pathway, but there's a whole nother pathway that we're not used to thinking about. And that's really the focus of this symposium today, which is, or part of what we're talking about today. Climate is going to affect our food production. We know that because of global warming, there are going to be droughts in Africa, more droughts than there were before. There's going to be parts of Africa where food insecurity is going to increase because people are not able to grow the crops that they used to grow. And that's going to affect their behaviors, right? Instead of being able to eat what they usually did, they're going to have to find new things that'll affect their outcomes. We're going to see more stunting, more wasting. We're going to see more negative health outcomes because of that global warming. Even if they don't change their behaviors to find crops that they can eat that are being grown, it turns out that warming itself affects the nutrient content of crops. So wheat that is grown in hotter temperatures has less iron, less zinc, and we're going to see more anemia and worse health outcomes because of this global warming. Both of these things I've talked about, climate change through the food production pathway to health outcomes or climate change directly to health outcomes, is a little bit fatalistic because I've started and I've just drawn arrows that go from the left to the right. That box over there, climate change, is not fixed. We can do something about that box. In fact, I want to talk about food production and how that affects climate change. That's important because our food systems account for 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. Let me say that again. All emissions globally that we produce as a species, 1/3 of them come from our human food systems. And it makes a big difference what kind of foods you produce. This is a chart of research we've done. We looked at greenhouse gas emissions from selected foods. The units is carbon dioxide equivalents per kilograms of edible portion. If you're talking about fruits and vegetables, relatively low impact, less than a kilogram. Wheat, brown rice, the same. Gets to be a little bit more when you start talking about some protein foods, particularly animal protein foods. And then the whole thing gets blown off the chart when you include beef in there. It's 8 to 10 times more impactful than chicken. If we were to produce less beef, just that alone could impact our climate even more than probably what we'll talk about today, as important as what we're going to talk about today is. But then how do you get less beef produced? The only way you can get less beef produced is if consumers demand it less. If there's more of us that move away from beef, for example, that will affect what producers produce. They're not going to be able to sell it if nobody's buying it. And the same time that we move away from beef, we're also improving our own health outcomes because there's less saturated fat in other animal proteins that we might eat or vegetable proteins. That means we're going to have less cardiovascular disease. And so we can have a win-win, improve our health, reduce climate change by changing our diet. But today, what we're going to talk about is a different means of changing food production to impact the climate, and that has to do with green infrastructures. Imagine that we are growing fruits and vegetables on the roof of Tidewater. Could you imagine that? I mean, what is that going to do? First of all, it's going to decrease the energy needed for us to cool or heat this building in the winter, right? So there's energy savings there. It's going to capture rainwater, so we're going to have less flooding. And if you think about all the roofs in New Orleans doing this, it could make a dent in terms of the flooding. We're not going to have to be bringing in food, as Catherine pointed out, from rural areas. We'll have it right on our roofs. And imagine that you took an elevator ride from fruits and vegetables you grew on the roof of Tidewater down to a kitchen on the basement of Tidewater, which we don't yet have, but that kitchen could be cooking up some interesting and tasty foods. All of that sort of work could happen, and we're going to hear more about that from our speakers today about green infrastructure. There's lots of potential for food production to reduce climate and environmental change. At the same time, improving our dietary behaviors, because obviously if you're growing fruits and vegetables on the roof, we can make them more accessible to community members. That means it's easier to get to, they're cheaper, they're local. And those dietary behaviors and are going to influence our health outcomes in positive ways, because we're not eating enough fruits and vegetables. We're not getting enough fiber. We're not getting enough antioxidants, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of win-win possibilities from green infrastructure, and particularly when it's addressing food production. So all of this was to say that by thinking about food production and the pathways towards health outcomes that it implies, that we can have a richer concept of what it means to think about climate and health. It is not just a one-way arrow that goes from climate change to health outcomes, but it includes this whole other pathway, and those arrows go in both directions. And so for all of those reasons, we're really happy to bring this symposium to you today to give you a little flavor of how we can expand the discussion in climate health to include food. And that was my spiel. And now what I'm going to do is introduce our speakers. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to introduce our first set of our panelists, basically. And what I like to ask each of you to do, as I mention your name, is to stand up and face the audience so the audience can get an idea, a visual image of who you are. As I say it, because we're going to do all the introductions at once, and so it makes it easier for people to capture. So Tyler, you're first. Tyler Anthrop is an urban planner and designer and climate activist and educator. He's currently the visiting assistant professor at the Tulane School of Architecture. He's going to be giving us a broad perspective on green infrastructure in New Orleans. Susanna Burley. Susanna is a landscape architect, and she founded and is the executive director of Sustaining Our Urban Landscapes, or SOUL. She'll talk about New Orleans reforestation plan and strategies for the Central Business District. Riley Essert. Riley is the Youth and Environmental Programs Manager for Groundwork New Orleans, where she teaches residents and youth about green infrastructure through an equity lens. She will talk about using data and historical context to identify green infrastructure needs. Mina Speck has a background in the culinary world and with a focus on local and sustainably grown foods. She is currently the community food director at Sprout NOLA, and she will talk about food production and local food access in the age of climate change. And finally, for the panelists, Michael Richard II has over 10 years of experience working with diverse populations in local food and wellness. He's currently the farm director of Recirculating Farms, and he will talk about rooftop farm and innovative growing initiatives in New Orleans. And I'll ask each of our speakers to hand it off to the next person by just advancing the slide. So I'm going to do that first. Let's see if it works. Yes, Tyler, you're next up.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I thought it would be good to start by setting a bit of context. Obviously, the major topic of this symposia is about food systems and green infrastructure. My background is in urban planning and urban water management, particularly focused here in New Orleans. And so while we have all of these incredible people who are going to talk about solutions, I thought maybe I'd set some context around what our challenges are to begin. And so I always think it's important to talk about New Orleans in terms of how we developed here originally. And so you can see in the images here, we have two historical views of the city, both from its early founding in the French Quarter along this dramatic bend in the Mississippi River, which, contrary to sort of current understanding that New Orleans is primarily below sea level and is probably not a good place to develop, was actually an incredibly great place for the colonists at the time to settle. And partially they chose that area because of its history as a place for Native people to gather and trade for thousands of years before that. Because of its strategic location at the curve of the river, which gave it great defenses from the sea, but also because of this curve, it is actually on higher ground because of the deposits of soil that were carried there by the river. over time, as the city continued to urbanize, you can see in the image to the right, we continued to develop along the natural levee of the river on the high ground in areas of town that would have been, in the range of 11 to 3 or 4 feet above sea level. As you got further back towards the lake, where we would start to seep down closer towards sea level. But historically, we kept along this pattern of development while trying to stay on the higher ground in places where drainage systems could happen more naturally, and we could sort of live within the landscape of the city and vernacular buildings that were built for our climate. As we moved into the middle of the 20th century, modern engineering, electricity, mechanization, all made it possible for us to develop the city from the river to the lake. And so what this means is that we started to build our city reliant on things like mechanized pumping for stormwater, and by using architectural styles that were no longer built to suit our climate, building slab-on-grade ranch houses with 8-foot ceilings rather than the raised high ceiling homes we have that were suited to our wet and hot climates. And so this has obviously presented us with a number of challenges, primarily of which first became apparent in the 1960s, where we started to experience heavy storm surge flooding from hurricanes. In response to that, we largely decided to surround our city by a series of walls. And so we have become virtually an island in the Gulf, where we are surrounded by levees on all sides, which allows us to be protected and gives us a unique protection amongst other coastal cities. And so I don't want to discount this as a bad thing. This is actually an incredible asset that we have through federal investment, that we are protected, unlike many of our peers in coastal places dealing with sea level rise. However, it's also given us the challenge of what do we do with the water that falls inside of our walls. And so we've really began to develop this both urban and coastal delta as a means of defending ourselves against our increasing threat from large storm events and other climate risks. And so through coastal work, working through barrier islands, natural ridges, marsh restorations, the building of levees, and then activities that occur within the delta on the inside of the levees, we can start to find more holistic solutions to these ongoing challenges of stormwater management. Challenges still remain, though, in terms of the elevation of the city that exists within our levee system. And so, again, the popular myth is that New Orleans is a city below sea level. It's actually roughly half above, half below. But that certainly means that for those folks that live in areas that lie below sea level, they are at significant risk, both from everyday flooding, but also from large-scale flood events and these large rain events that we have. Because of this mixture of elevation and walls around our city, we are required to use a series of mechanized pumps in order to pump almost every inch of stormwater that falls on our city that isn't absorbed into the soil out through our drainage system into canals, which almost exclusively end up in Lake Pontchartrain. And so this has created this sort of current paradigm in which we've developed, where our priority is building and paving, allowing water to run off as quickly as possible as if it were a nuisance, and to dispose of it as quickly as possible through mechanized pumping. We also face significant challenges with subsidence, where both the ground within the levees are sinking, but the levees themselves are sinking at a time when the sea level is rising. And so this is a challenge for us in figuring out how can we stem the tide of subsidence while also thinking of new ways to protect ourselves from storm surge threats. We also know that these challenges are impacting New Orleanians disproportionately. And so the people who live within the lower ground areas tend to be communities of color and lower income communities. And so they face a disproportionate burden of the impacts of everyday street flooding and of these larger rain events, and an increased risk going forward through climate change. And so just to sort of begin to wrap things up, the critical challenges that I think we face, identified through the urban water plan developed by Wagner and Ball just over a decade ago, and the solutions to which you'll hopefully hear some about here today, are that our drainage systems are often overwhelmed and we have too much runoff causing flooding. We've continued to pump as much water as we can, meaning that we continue to sink, and we are also wasting our critical water assets that we could be using for things like developing areas to create food and to solve our climate crisis. And so moving towards a system of using our water as an asset is really the solution to adapting New Orleans to climate change. Thank you. I will now welcome up Susanna Burley.
Thank you, Tyler. I'm Susanna Burley with Soul, and I founded Soul in 2016. And I'm excited to say that in a month, we will be planting our 10,000th tree. So that's a big deal. So come out and help us plant. We founded Soul because we had a particular strategy that we wanted to apply to planting trees in New Orleans. Because of my landscape architecture background, I think in systems. And so I guess he's kind of my co-founder, but my board chair, we were always talking about planting large swaths of trees at a time. And so we approached the challenge of how deforested we are in New Orleans with this idea of trying to plant as many trees as we can in one place. So I'll tell you a little bit about our journey. Okay. Oh, it's on the keyboard. Okay. Tyler just did a great job of explaining these old maps of New Orleans, but I love these maps because, especially the one on the right, because it shows you just how forested we used to be. And really, we can grow anything here. In fact, I went to check on some trees that we had planted years ago on Bayou St. John, up by the dental school. And there was an issue with nobody knowing who was supposed to mow it. And so nobody had mowed it forever. And I saw this watermelon vine growing up one of our trees. And I thought somebody was sitting here and just spit out some watermelon seeds and it grew. Like, that's how fertile New Orleans is. And I find that fascinating. And I find that encouraging as well, because establishing trees in some places is much harder than it is here. So I think we're very fortunate in that regard. We all remember this, Hurricane Katrina. Because of this storm, we lost about 200,000 trees, and the resulting tree canopy afterwards was 18.5%. Trees are barometers of wealth and health, and in places with concentrated wealth is where you see the concentrations of trees. And places with concentrated poverty is where you see a lack of trees. And that's not just here, that's across the world. In fact, here, there's such a disparity. In City Park and the neighborhoods around it, the tree canopy is 30.1% tree canopy coverage. So that's about 30% of that area is covered with tree canopy. Polar opposite are the community housing. So Cooper, BW Cooper on the West Bank, 1.4%. The Florida development, 0.8%. St. Thomas, 0.8%. Iberville, 0.5%. And then, as Megan and I were discussing a while back, the CBD this is not a low income place, but it's at 0.6% because of all the buildings. Okay. So you can't really see it that well on this photograph, but I think it's an interesting aerial because you see just how green, once again, we are. We have the potential to be so green and so fertile here, but we're really like what you see in most areas. Like, this looks like the area around the airport, an industrial area, a parking lot. But this is our city, and we should really be much greener. Okay, so when we first started, we knew what we wanted to grow into, but we had to get the awareness out there that we were doing this work. And so we started by it was just me at that point, and dragging my husband with me on Saturdays with shovels in our cars. But we started by training block captains who, just heard about us on the internet or whatever, or I went to like every neighborhood association meeting in the city to see who might be interested. So I trained block captains, and they door knocked and asked people who was interested in getting a tree in front of their house. And it was a very time consuming experience, drawing a map. We would turn it into Parks and Parkways and get it permitted. And gosh, I thought my whole speech was 2 minutes. Anyway, okay, so yeah, we started with the door knocking, and then Eugene Green, who is councilman now, he came to us and said, I want you to plant trees in my neighborhood, and I want to see one in front of every house. And we were like, oh, that's such an easy explanation. We were trying to explain it in a way too complicated of a manner for people. And so we got funding for it, and it was so successful. So we offered trees via door hangers and mailing letters to people, and people could opt out if they wanted. But we ended up planting all these trees that you see in front of me in Pontchartrain Park, and that has become our strategy. And it's great because, one tree can only do so much. But when you plant an entire neighborhood full of trees, you can really change how the neighborhood responds to a huge storm or to a drought. And so we're able to keep the neighborhood drier and clean the air and so on. So that's our strategy now, is we're planting entire neighborhoods at a time. We also, about 1.5 years ago, we published the New Orleans Reforestation Plan. And we were surprised, my board and I kept discussing the fact that we were so surprised that the city hadn't published a plan since Katrina, because we had lost so many trees. And finally they were like, okay, you have to do it. And I was like, what? No. But we did it. We started by getting baseline data. We actually got 2 sets of data to make sure it was correct. And we found out that New Orleans has 18.5% canopy coverage, whereas Memphis has 31, Charlotte has 47, Austin 36, Atlanta 47, Miami 20, et cetera. So this was very interesting, and we did 2.5 years of outreach to citizens, experts, professionals. I think you were there, right? Utilities, et cetera. And so then we hired Spackman Mossop Michaels, a local landscape architecture firm, and they synthesized all this data into this beautiful plan, which I have a copy here if you want to look at it, or it's on our website. But in that plan, I'm going to wrap it up in 1 second, I promise. But in that plan, we have 5 pilot projects that we're working on. And we're planting these trees with volunteers like these fabulous folks. But we're also excited that we need to scale up. We know that. And so we don't have any more Saturdays left in the year. So we're using our friends at Groundwork to plant trees, and other partners. And we also capture data on our trees. So I won't run through it, but you can see it. As the trees grow, so does their impact. And we use this data to help us plan our projects, but also we use it to tell our story to communities and to funders. And I think that's about it. Let's see. Feel free to call me or email me. And now I'm going to hand it over to Riley Essert with Groundwork New Orleans.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I am going to be talking today a little bit about using data and historical context to identify local green infrastructure needs. And this was coming from a question that was posed on how can we support these community-led projects in the race against the climate clock. A little bit about Groundwork. who we are. We're a community organization dedicated to enhancing green infrastructure. And we do that by collaborating closely with local residents on practical stormwater management projects, implementing both large-scale and smaller residential initiatives. There's a picture of Vision to Reality site with our partners at Healthy Community Services. And we do everything with the core focus of workforce development and youth empowerment. I want to talk about this particular map. This is a historic redlining map of the city of New Orleans. As you can see, a lot of our city was redlined, which is unique if you look at it in comparison to other cities. But New Orleans is chock full of leaders. We have several of them in the room. And I think we've been collectively putting in some of these really smart climate adaptation interventions in the ground for decades now. But we do have to understand the challenges that we've faced, and we must recognize the historical context as to why our neighborhoods look the way they do. And this is the result of something called redlining. So I know everyone has different levels of understanding about that, but in short, it was a race-based housing policy that denied certain neighborhoods access to resources and funds, particularly neighborhoods that were inhabited by people of color. And this discrimination led to disinvestment in these neighborhoods. So we know that a lack of resources does result in fewer trees, fewer parks, fewer critical resources that we need to mitigate these effects of climate change. And we know that these redlined, and yellow is only one step below redlined, mind you. We know those neighborhoods are the most vulnerable when it comes to the impending climate change effects. So another thing to consider with these redlining maps is that we also know these neighborhoods that were redlined experience, and still today experience, less access to food. So with our residents, we came to another question, and that was, where are our community assets and where are the gaps in coverage near us? And that is where we came to creating a map. So I have it written here, so I'll just read it. This map was designed to show the collaborative impact of resident-led community organizations toward implementing nature-based green infrastructure solutions that mitigate the impacts of flooding and heat. In short, the first goal was to just view the citywide distribution of these projects, right? And then we also want to be able to identify where are our gaps here. And probably most importantly, we want to be able to prioritize the most climate vulnerable blocks. So this was unique, and we have some of our contributors of data here with us today. Couldn't do it without y'all, so I really appreciate it. So this first left side screenshot is just of the map, and you can kind of see that I put a layer, there's several layers, which are really fun to toggle, and this will be available for the public to kind of check out. But we have the historic redlining boundaries there, and we can now see down to the block group areas that have high heat vulnerability, more so than the surrounding areas, even within a historically redlined neighborhood. We can also see the pluvial flood model. We can see a lot of different interesting layers at the same time. There, you can see them. I know it's small, but something to check out. And then we can also see our collective impact. So that's almost 1,000 features just by these organizations listed below. We know many green stormwater infrastructure features do exist in tandem with urban gardens. And we also know that trees can be both a source of food and water management. These things are deeply interconnected, which is why we're all here today chatting about these things. The long-term goal of this map is to show the network of climate assets that we have as a community, including and not limited to green stormwater infrastructure and public food sources and urban farms and garden to address the food access disparities as well. And then the importance of this tool, it really highlights the distribution of community resources, those climate adaptation interventions, food accessibility, and particularly focusing on where those red line neighborhoods are and are more, sorry, on my throat, are more likely to experience heat vulnerability. And yeah, I think that's everything on this slide. So it shows us where we've been. We can determine what our next steps are going to be to make sure that we're doing a lot of the planning a little bit more equitably. And we can use this map as a tool to determine, okay, we know we're putting these things in the ground as fast as possible, but can we do it even more efficiently, putting them in areas of the highest concern and vulnerability? And that's it. That's all I got. So my email. I will, oh, did I mess that up? I'll pass it to Mina Speck from Sprout. Thank y'all.
Hello, hi guys, how's it going? Hello. So my name's Mina Sek, and I am the community food director with Sprout. So that's okay, don't worry. My organization is a New Orleans-based with and also Southeast Louisiana technical assistance for farmers and growers. So what that means is technical and social support for farmers and growers. We do that through coalition-based work. There are a lot of great organizations throughout the state that are working hard to support farmers, which is the heart of our food system, right? And it was brought up multiple times today, but just how important food is. Dr. Catherine, Dr. Rose brought up some beautiful things about food. So I'm a little nervous to have this topic. I'm not going to lie, because it's the only one about food at the Food Symposium. So, well, the pressure's on. But our organization works hard to make sure that we can keep the system going, and we do that through many different ways. So food production is a powerful climate solution. Helping farmers adopt sustainable methods and implementing regenerative agriculture practices helps reduce the carbon footprint and protects the environment, right? So farmers can do that. I can't step away from the mic, sorry. Farmers can do that through cover cropping. Cover cropping is a practice that also works towards regenerative soil health, which, as some of you may know, but it is very important, and that is a solution in climate change, and it captures carbon, and it helps make sure that your soil is healthy, because you can't grow healthy foods without healthy soil. And we talked a little bit earlier about nutrient dense foods and how that happens, right? Like, you can grow a beautiful head of lettuce that might not necessarily have the nutrients that it needs and should have in it if your soil does not carry that, right? So growing beautiful produce is one thing, but making sure that you're growing healthy foods is actually really important. So soil testing is another really important tool that we encourage our farmers to do consistently. Land tenure is one way that we, as a solution for climate change, because when you are a farmer and you're consistently having to relocate and move, and that can be for urban farmers, that can be for rural farmers, it's just very important that there's land tenure. Water retention is another great way to capture carbon and protect the environment. Water conservation is the same thing. And I want to note something here, and why it's important to adopt regenerative practices and be aware of climate changes. I think last summer, we all remember we had extreme drought and extreme heat. We just kept breaking records, right? And what we noticed, our farmers, when we were talking to them, no one knew how to grow in that weather, right? Like, we're used to rain. It was something new, right? Like, we in New Orleans are not, we know how climate change affects us, right? But that was something that was really different and new, and farmers didn't necessarily know how to handle that. And that really sparked something within our growing community. And we actually had our first annual farmer climate convening last year because of the outcomes and from what happened last year. Farmer resources and infrastructure is another powerful solution in helping climate change, because again, farming is not really a high income field. And so when you become a farmer, you're not like, I'm going to become a farmer because I want to be rich. You become a farmer because you love the land, you love your community, you love growing, whatever it may be. You're becoming a farmer because you want to grow food, not because of money. And so it's really important to make sure that farmers have resources and infrastructure in place to continue our food system, especially a local food system. Next up, at our organization, we strongly believe in policy and advocacy as a solution to climate change, especially for farmers. Resources and infrastructure is a really important thing, but if you're not going towards the belly of the beast, you can only do so much, right? So we advocate for our farmers to know the difference between local, state, and federal government and how those policies affect us. I don't know how many are familiar with the Farm Bill, but that piece of legislation comes out every 5 years. It's at a standstill right now because food is such a powerful tool, and the government knows that, right? Like they know that they're in control of our food and our communities, and they use that as a weapon against us sometimes, unfortunately. So having farmers advocate for themselves and understand that they have a voice and it's important, and it's, going to DC, having fly-ins and speaking to your representatives and telling them these are the things that you need as a farmer is really important so that they can hopefully pass a farm bill. Let's keep our fingers crossed for next year. And there's also, of course, local policies that are important as well. And our organization, in coalition with some other amazing organizations, Michael is one of them, we actually just got an urban ag liaison position seated, and that was through a really large, a lot of policy work. And that position is intended to help our local growers because, again, you're not making a lot of money when you're a farmer and you're a grower, and when you're having to spend a lot of time on the phone with Sewage and Water Board, or you're having to fight all the zoning because you keep getting blight citations and stuff when it's no, you're cover cropping, this is important, right? So having this urban ag liaison position and having someone being seated within City Hall, they're going to be in the Office of Resilience and Sustainability, and it is an official city position that will not move with the new mayor, which is very exciting. Everybody a round of applause for that one. But it's just important for farmers to boldly advocate for themselves and their needs because, nonprofits and universities and, even the USDA folks, you need the farmers at the table. And so it's really important to us that we advocate for them to speak for themselves. And then community engagement and organizing is another key piece to food production and access, especially in our changing climate. So with a focus on diversity and community, we work to build a more sustainable local food system where everyone has the chance to grow. Our organization does this through not only community classes and open community garden hours and stuff, but we have resources. Again, resources are the best way to build a healthy food system. So we want to encourage folks to grow in their backyard. We want to encourage schools to grow. So we offer plants, seeds, things that we can help our community in any way possible, because it's about empowering farmers and creating a more equitable future for food. And we believe in equity deeply. And last slide. So just doubling down on building a sustainable and robust local food system that can adapt to the climate change and provide all community members in times of crisis is an important part of climate resilience. And don't want to talk about post-disaster because we all know what that looks like, but it is important to have other things in place that when a disaster does hit, we don't have to feel as though we're scrambling for our food or relying on things being brought into us. And that can be community coolers, that's community spaces where farmers can hold and store their produce. That's solar power, right? Having a solar powered community cooler is super important to making sure that food lasts, right? Farmers can harvest before a storm hits and it can be held in a place that won't lose power. That's an important and really vital piece to our community food system, especially in a changing climate. So I think I will end it there because I'm out of time. I thank you all so much. And I would love to introduce Michael Richard from Recirculating Farms.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Michael Richard from Recirculating Farms. I'm the farm director there. We are a food and environmental justice organization that takes a holistic approach at addressing these issues. So green roofs are cool. They truly are. We wanted to present to you all a variety of different green roofs. What you're seeing on your screen right now is a picture of Brooklyn Grange, which is a green roof farm in Brooklyn, New York. They've been operating for a very long time now. And as you can see from that picture, it doesn't look like it's on a rooftop. This looks like a farm that is right there on the ground, soil, rows, everything, greenhouse, everything right there on top of a roof. A lot of times when people think of green roofs, they're thinking of hydroponics or maybe just some air plants and things like that, but it can be so much more. And that's what we're hoping to show you today. Recirculating Farms became very interested in green roofs when our executive director, Marianne Coufone, was living in New York and became friends with the people who run Brooklyn Grange, and another person named Yimi who runs a farm called Okaru Farm, which is actually an aquaponic farm on top of a roof. We wanted to show people these green roofs because they have so many benefits aside from just providing food. They can also help lower temperatures and provide a plethora of benefits for the environments that they're located in. We have been trying to raise the profile of urban innovative agriculture practices, and green roofs are one of the ones that we've been trying to uplift a lot more recently. We had an opportunity to do this by entering a cooling competition called 10X Across. Colleges all across the 10X corridor, the I-10 corridor, were entered into a competition to find a cooling solution. Ours was green roofs. A lot of the other solutions that were presented were mechanical and had a lot of barriers, but we truly believe that ours is the most accessible and flexible solution that can be adapted across the entire corridor. So to do this, we put together a team of Loyola students from a variety of disciplines, and myself and Marianne had a dual role in this because the student teams had to have an administrator over the team, but also have a community partner. I'm lucky enough to be a student. Well, I just graduated with my master's from Loyola, but at the time, thank you. At the time, I was a master's student at Loyola and also the farm director at Recirculating Farms. And Marianne Coufone, our executive director, was our advisor, and she's also a law professor at Loyola. So over at Recirculating Farms, we thought we were a great community partner for this because we have tested, designed, and installed a bunch of different innovative systems. I struggle to use the word innovative because a lot of these things that we deem innovative today are really just old school techniques that we're applying with new technologies like pumps and electricity and plastics. But I will use innovative for cohesiveness of this. But we use a lot of different, we demonstrate a lot of different growing methods, even on our teaching farm that is a regenerative farm located right here in the city on Jackson Avenue in Central City, New Orleans. We do in-ground farming, hydroponic farming, aquaponic farming, vertical growing, you name it, we do it, and we teach classes on it. So we thought we were a great partner to build and design some green roofs and have them tested right in Central City, New Orleans. So why did we pick green roofs? Well, it's because of a lot of things that a lot of people here have already mentioned, because they can provide a lot of food, they can help absorb rainwater, they also provide beneficial habitat for a lot of different insects and other organisms, which provide a lot of ecosystem services that are oftentimes overlooked. In addition to that, they provide food. One of the things that comes to people's mind first, and there's so many different ways to provide food. I mentioned earlier that we do vertical farming, hydroponic, aquaponic. All of those things are widely adaptable to green roof solutions, and not just green roofs, but living buildings in general. The EPA has estimated that a properly installed green roof can lower ambient temperatures 30 to 40 degrees, which can dramatically cut down on savings and your energy costs. This is a big thing, and that was the main point of this competition, where they were trying to find energy saving ideas. And so that is why we pitched it in that forefront. But to us, that is just a very, very small benefit of green roofs, because they have so many other things that they can do, like benefiting the community by strengthening their food system, giving them cleaner air, more predictable rainfall, and also having economic benefits. Because this is a new industry, especially in New Orleans, where this is very untapped market, there's a possibility for people to start up businesses where they are installing these green roofs, and also create businesses that support the green roof business in itself, such as growing plants for it or providing training to help others create these green roofs. We wanted to take this proactive measure in Central City because, like a lot of other people showed a lot of really great maps, Central City is a historically redlined neighborhood, and it is one of the worst heat islands in the city. This map is, you can see it a little bit on here, but this was actually designed by a GIS student at Loyola, and it shows the heat island of New Orleans. We're one of the worst in the country, and where we are designing these test sites in Central City is one of the worst in this city. So we proposed a few different types of green roofs. We have our hydroponic and our air plants. So the hydroponic one would be your traditional hydro towers or deep water cultures. There's a lot of different hydroponic methods that you can use, but we demonstrated all of these. And we also had a more lightweight version of air plants, because as we know, a lot of people's concerns with doing green roofs is the stability of it. How much weight can we actually support on our building? So air plants is a very lightweight method of still being able to get that coverage. We have an intensive one, which would be raised beds or sort of that farm style that you saw in the Brooklyn Grange picture. And then we have an extensive one, which would be the intensive would be just more like raised beds, and the extensive one would be more like the Brooklyn Grange method, where you actually have in-ground rows and the such. Things that you need to do to ensure success of these programs is making sure that you have the proper building that can support the weight and also isn't too pitched, because you can't have materials sliding off of the roof. You need to make sure that the building is not going to hold excess water, adding even more weight to the structure. And you also need to make sure that it is something that's accessible and maintainable. Something that we see with a lot of the green projects that we create around the city are that sometimes there's not people to maintain them. And a lot of times when one person leaves an organization, that was the only person maintaining it, that garden is now going to die. So it's important that we educate a lot of people to be able to maintain these systems. I'm going to go through this really quickly because I don't have a whole lot of time, but there are a plethora of community benefits to these rooftop gardens. They can be spaces for people to meet, spaces for people to get food, places to educate our children in STEM. It is a very, very wide range of benefits that we can get from these green roofs, and a wide range of ways that we can design them. And that open space for creativity is something that we really want to dive into, because as we know, New Orleans is probably one of the most creative places on the planet. We have 2 sites where we are planning to set up our first training sites and demo sites. One is at our farm on Jackson Avenue. Like I mentioned, we'll be putting a green roof on top of our shipping containers. That method would be the air plant and hydroponic. And then we have a picture of the Myrtle Banks building, which used to be the Drives Market. We will hopefully be moving there very soon and have a full demonstration site there with every model that we propose there, where we can train other people on how to use, maintain, and install them. And we'll be looking to reach out to other community partners to help make this possible, because we're not engineers or architects. We're just some farmers and policy nerds. And, you know, as Mina said, a lot of the great work that we have gotten done here has never been in a vacuum. It's always been with community and working with, leveraging all of our talents and skills and resources to make this stuff happen. So we're really looking forward to doing that again. Thank y'all.
Wow. Thank you, Michael. I love that. Green roofs are cool. Just keeping that. So thank you so much. And I will say you all were so amazing about this tall order of doing all of this in such limited amount of time. So thank you. And the reason why we gave this challenge to our speakers is that we want to have a conversation. So we have this set up here. So the panelists, if you can please join us here. Our Zoom attendees, you can put your questions in the chat, and you let us know in the back. Okay, good. And we have 2 of our amazing students here, Jenna and Lauren, that will be passing around with some microphones for us to begin that conversation. Do you have the microphones? Oh, we need the microphones. So maybe I was gonna jump into one question, but we do have a question. Please, the audience.
Let's see, I want to make sure I have my question formulated right, but my question is about dispelling the myths of having too many trees and hurricane risks of having trees on your lots, and also the maintenance, extensive maintenance additions because of trees. So like mowing around them. I've worked with Susanna in the past to try to get some trees on some properties that were shut down because of maintenance issues or perceived maintenance issues, maybe I should say.
Can you hear me? Okay. Maintenance needs are a real thing, but in our city, I'm going to flip this challenge into a business opportunity because we have a lot of people who work with students here. I think there's an opportunity for somebody to start something that does like arborist maintenance on low income properties because we get calls almost every day, and you probably do too, and I'm sure Groundwork does too, like how we need to trim this tree. The quotes I'm getting are $3,000 and I can't afford it. I couldn't afford that either. But trees and landscapes, they all do need maintenance. So there's a business opportunity for you. But that being said, we try to be very careful about where we put our trees. And so we look at the diameter of the tree, that it's like, don't go buy a tree at Lowe's and go plant it up next to your house because it looks cute right then. You want to look at the diameter of the tree and then add about 10 feet and make sure, like, if the tree is going to get 30 feet wide, the radius of it is 15, add another 10 feet, plant it 25 feet from your house. So if it does get knocked over in a storm, it's not going to fall on your house. If you don't have a huge yard like that, then plant a smaller tree. That would be my best suggestion. But, you know, trees are like people, like we got to go to the doctor and the dentist and we got to get a haircut, all that stuff. So I do think they need maintenance.
Can I add to that? I think also we definitely have to consider that there is a fear of increasing insurance costs, people fearing storms, what happens to their house if there's a tree next to it. And I know some of us have done some canvassing for tree plantings and come across a resident who's definitely apprehensive about the entire process, has said, I had a tree, I took it out because it was a liability, I thought, and it's a lot of maintenance. So definitely the education piece is key, but also being real with the discussion and being open to hearing residents' pushback, because quite frankly, there's always that discussion of what happens when this whole area becomes green and beautiful and lots of trees. Is there a consideration of gentrification? Do I worry about not being able to stay in my neighborhood? What does that really look like long term? People want to have these conversations and we can't be afraid to have them.
Yeah, good point. And for the young future policymakers in the room, the insurance, everything that's happening with insurance in this state is out of control. So I think a lot of people do want the trees, but they cannot afford what insurance might charge them for having that tree.
And that's a quick follow-up from Zoom about actually the cost of insurance. I don't know if we can give that answer, if you know, or it's just that it's just high and for the cost of insurance, somebody asking Zoom. Mm-hmm.
Wide range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you what mine costs, it's not cute. It's another mortgage. It's too much. Yeah. It's a quick Google search. You can read a bunch about the rising insurance costs in New Orleans and across the Gulf region, really. If you talk to any of your friends who are in Florida right now, they'll tell you they have the same cry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wanted to double up on the maintenance real quick before I ask my real question. But I was just at tree school a few weeks ago, and somebody had a great grad student research project where they had some statistic of if you prune like the size trees that Susanna plants, if you prune those in their earlier stages, you don't have to prune for $3,000 in a mature tree. So that is it's a good talking point that I stored away for people to plant new trees. It's easier to take care of. You can prune them with a hand shear, and it's not the live oak that's in my backyard that does cost $3,000, but I love it, so I do it. But my real question is for Michael, and if you know, especially the one in the Green Roof in Brooklyn, what's the irrigation like? Do you have a rainwater harvesting? Do you get to keep it? Do you have to use, like, I think I see drip lines on this picture? what's that whole process
Just
for
for
the green
the
roof?
green roof.
Yeah.
So yeah, the irrigation system will be system dependent. And so we designed it when we were doing our prototypes. We have some that are working off of rain catchment system. Obviously the air plants are working off of the lovely humidity we have here. But you can have rain catchment systems at the bottom, so you're not storing extra water weight up top. But then you can also do deep water culture aquaponic like systems that can also have a decoupled irrigation part. So it really is system dependent, and it's extremely customizable.
Wait, hold on. Wait. What can you grow? What can you grow in the air plant range as far as like can you get large lettuce heads doing that, or
No, those would be just strictly ornamental plants.
just ornamental? Okay.
Oh, just
that's what I
ornamentals,
figured.
yes. Well, there might be some succulents you can eat, but you know. Right. Yeah.
There was a here and then.
Yes, we have a problem of termites. It is a very serious problem, and termites, the branch get rotten. Everybody knows that. Then falls on the roof, costs a bundle of money. And this is where the insurance also. Another thing that we are limited to the roof structure. We don't have flat roofs in the city. And that has maybe some of you have tried to talk to the policymakers or the construction. Another thing is the backyards. We don't have that much. Many people nowadays, they are using concrete for the backyards, and we have very limited space. One more thing that I did not hear the word organic for those people who are talking about planting. Are we using pesticides to control the bugs because of the heat and humidity in the area? Or are we picking up the maggots by hand? And bugs, bacteria, fungus, all of those, what we are doing about it.
So you didn't hear the word organic from either me or I, because we use the word regenerative, which is a step above organic. Not to get too into the weeds, no pun intended. Organic from the government doesn't really hold a lot of weight in the farming community because they still allow you to use a lot of things that would never touch our farm. So we practice regenerative agriculture, where we work with nature to solve a lot of the issues of bad bacteria, bad fungi, bad bugs, by creating a balanced ecosystem, working with the good fungi and the predatory bugs that eat the bad bugs, and using those things to help mitigate a lot of our problems. Do you have anything to add on that?
No, you go. No, I just wanted to echo Michael's words and say, yeah, we don't bring up the words organic because regenerative is the idea of a climate food production as a climate solution is that you're not adding heavy amendments to your soil. You're not using pesticides. You're not using non-organic, like you're going to use just like nature to fertilize your soil. And that's why soil testing is important. So you can see what you're missing in your soil and what you need to add to it. Maybe, again, we want to encourage minimal amendments if possible. You want to let nature do it itself. That's also why cover cropping comes into play. And yeah, you want to create an ecosystem that's going to support and balance itself out, right? Like if you've got a lot of bugs, if the more critters that you see in your garden, the better your garden is doing, right? You want to see bugs, you want to see different varieties, you want to see frogs, you want to see lizards, you want to see them, and they usually work themselves out, right? Like there are ways that you can get rid of aphids, but I'm using that as an example, but you know, aphids are like kind of gnarly. And there are ways you can spray it with neem oil, but if you just let an aphid infested plant chill for a little bit, you want to like isolate it, right? But if you let it go in like a couple days, you're going to see ladybugs all over it, eating it. Like it's going to work itself out. And if it doesn't, you pull it, you toss it, don't compost it, depending on like how, and I mean, depending on your composting situation, because then you're just going to reintroduce it to all of your compost and then you didn't really get rid of it. But yeah, there's tons of ways to farm without using non-organic pesticides.
And we both teach free classes on this weekly.
Yeah, come on by.
Several of us in the room plant trees, healthy community services, Waterwise, Sewage and Water Board, groundwork and soul, and probably more than that. And we've all probably seen the same thing, that when we buy trees from tree farms on the North Shore, and they use conventional practices. So, they are using fertilizers and they are spraying. So once again, business opportunity, because one of the tree farmers just retired, and there is a huge gap in the supply chain right now. And I think it is a good business opportunity. But yeah, there's nobody out there who grows organically, and maybe it's too hard. I don't know. I haven't tried it. But and we mostly plant street trees, so trees that are between the sidewalk and the street on the public right of way. And so after 1 year, the trees are under the purview of parks and parkways.
I also just wanted to quickly talk about your concern about people paving their backyards and sort of the ways that people are using their homes in ways that maybe aren't advantageous to our stormwater management and food needs. But I will say that to sort of Catherine's point earlier about adapting our existing policies for climate change, the city of New Orleans has been extremely innovative in terms of being the first city 10 years ago to incorporate what's called a permeable open space requirement in most of our zoning districts. And so in most places, you're required to keep a certain percentage of your lot as open space to create access to light and air. But in New Orleans, we also required that space be permeable, meaning that it is either grass or in a permeable paving material, so that the stormwater can still actually run off into the ground and not be completely run off onto the street. We're also the first city in the country to require that all parking stalls and new parking lots have to be paved in permeable paving. And so these are obviously small steps, but I think you raise a great point that we all have a role to play in our adaptation to climate change by ensuring that we're doing the best that we possibly can on our own properties as well as in our public spaces. Well, there's nothing, I mean, there's plenty we can do about termites that unfortunately, I don't know if there's a regenerative solution to them. They're an invasive species.
Look, I don't know that much, but I do know that there's some really interesting, like, old designs that include sandbars around certain areas of your home and things that deter termites from actually being able to burrow. But these are all solutions that we come up with together, right?
Okay, all right. Let me address some things. First of all, I am so proud of all of you. You know that I am. I don't know you yet, Michael, but I know everyone up there. But I am so proud of you all because we all work together collaboratively. To answer your question about organic, let me just tell you this because I'm gonna burst your bubble. Organic food grows right next to conventional food. And so when they're spraying for conventional foods, there's no way for when they're spraying aerially that it's not getting on the organic food. So if you just have to spend money, you can donate to one of our organizations if you're going to buy organic foods, because it really is a waste of your time. It's a designation by the federal government. Secondly, as it relates to termites, part of some of my new research is researching the stalks of the hemp to combat termites. And so it's also a mechanism to use for regenerative soil practices as well, because hemp is a grass and it grows, you can get up to 4 crops a year in using hemp. My question where I don't have that expertise is to ask you, Michael, about the rooftop gardens with supporting the weight with water. And because we live in a city that's 300 years old. However, the Dutch does vertical gardening and they do it successfully. We took a delegation of 26 people to Amsterdam this spring, and to see those vertical forests and to use that vertical mechanism can it be applied here? And do we have the infrastructure such as garages that we know are heavy to put those types of green roofs on? And we talk about green roofs here, but like to your point, we have a lot of slanted roofs and they're old. And so how do we manage the weight? That's the question and concern that I have as a green infrastructure practitioner. And when people are saying, I want a green roof, yeah, it looks good, but what's the practicality of it? Because we live in a city that has concrete and everybody wants the concrete removed till you start removing it and you see that you have 4 layers of concrete. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Yes, that's a great question. That was something that we came up against a lot when we were doing our pitch proposal. And our solution to that was a lot of off the roof water catchment systems. So most places in New Orleans, like you said, a lot of the buildings are old and a lot of the buildings with flat roofs are probably some of the oldest ones. So a lot of that water would have to be stored on the ground and then pumped up to the roof. There's a lot of hydroponics, was technically aeroponic, but everyone calls it hydroponic. A lot of those systems can grow a lot of food very densely. So when you do systems like that, you can plant food a lot closer and you're able to produce about 3 times as much using about 90% as less resources. So we're able to do that. And the sloped roofs are actually perfect for these types of systems because it gives you the natural slope that allows the water to drain off of the roof without using any mechanization or any additional construction. Yes, and it would work on the flat roofs as well. You would just have to when you built your system, you would just have to put it on a slight angle when you were installing it on the roof. But if you already have a sloped roof, you don't have to do that angle. And this is a system that's commonly used. It's called NFT channels, and it's essentially a gutter system where water is pumped up through into a gutter and it runs over the roots, and a nutrient film is created inside of the gutter, and that's what fertilizes the plants. So you would be able to do it almost anywhere, and then on the roofs that wouldn't be able to support even that, which would probably be indicative of more structural issues if you couldn't support gutters on your roof. You would still have the option of using the air plants, the air plant version, which is just a cattle panel with air plants tied to it.
I think also in terms of the way that we've tried to implement green roofs around New Orleans, we've found that the older buildings actually are able to hold much more weight than newer buildings, just simply because they weren't able to be as value engineered as newer buildings are. So they were built of larger old growth timber and masonry. So particularly in the downtown area, like a lot of the old warehouse buildings can support a ton of weight on their roofs. And there's like a sense among people that because they're old buildings, they can't be retrofitted in this way, but actually they're ideal candidates because they were designed to hold massive cast iron machinery that's no longer there. And they're also built of larger materials that were way oversized for the amount of weight that's on the building today. No, yeah, right. That was an industrial area, bringing in those cast iron materials. I mean, maybe a mouse.
Do you want to, I know Diego. Oh.
So Mina, you talked about that farming is not, you're not gonna make a lot of money on it. And there's a concern. A lot of us talk about community gardens and rooftop gardens as a way to improve food access to low-income communities, but low-income communities are struggling with finances, and to the extent that farms take a lot of money, a lot of time to grow, that's less time they have to make money in whatever job they're doing. And so I wonder if you all could talk a little bit about just sort of the economics of it. Can we do these kind of things as part-time hobbies, and maybe it's not just low-income people that are doing it, but it's students and all kinds of folks that are getting leisure time benefits from growing stuff that the food can get passed on or what. I don't know, just kind of curious to think about that conundrum of the economics of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is quite a conundrum. And as Michael brought up in his presentation about maintenance, that is one of the things, we do a lot of technical assistance, and we'll get calls from people that want to start a community garden, and, we offer resources, et cetera. And I'm like, I will absolutely help you plan this out. But what I always tell people is that you need to have a person. Better to have a team, right? But you need one person dedicated, whether that's a staff, whether that is just a really heavy-hearted volunteer that wants to do it, right? They're like, this is my baby, and they're not getting paid for it, but you really do need to have someone that's looking at it, right? We are lucky and very fortunate that we've got a lot of volunteers that come, and also the way that our garden is set up is that we have a lot of 24/7 accessible beds and produce and things. Like, not everything is behind a fence at our garden, so that folks, because we believe we try to lower the barriers to food access, and that means you don't have to come and grow with us in order to get food from us. So just come and take it. It doesn't matter. But our organization does have, it's me. I don't know why I was going to word it like that. Like we have a person. I am the person that, but we're hiring if anyone wants to hire. But yeah, it's just, and for years, it took, our garden started 10 years ago. Emily Mickley Doyle was the founder of that. And over time, how we got to having a full-time garden manager is because you learn that you have to have this again. And we have volunteers 3 days a week. Like, we have open garden hours. We have consistent open garden hours. We have some of our own gardeners that are here. I see a couple faces in the room that come weekly and garden with us. But yeah, I mean, I think that it is a conundrum. And I think what happens a lot of times is people want to start community gardens as this idea, which again, I obviously support, but you can't just haphazardly start a community garden. So ideally, right, you have community gardens, you have urban farmers that maybe are producing for market. Maybe they're selling at the truck farm table. You have farms like Recirculating Farms that offers market, they do a CSA box and they accept SNAP benefits. And there's just ways to get local produce to low income people without necessarily having them do the actual gardening themselves. And also, of course, education classes. And you want to create a space where people do feel comfortable to come and sit, and so that maybe organically it becomes this respite, and then people are encouraged to come farm. But you really, you need a person or a team.
Just to add a little bit to that, to make it economically feasible for more people to become farmers, there needs to be a shift in the subsidies. Most of our food is subsidized, and we need some of those subsidies to shift over into urban agriculture. And we also need places for people to capture a lot of the SNAP dollars that are leaving our state. So by having the truck farm table and market match at Crescent City Farmers Market and through Top Box Food, having these different avenues for people to spend their SNAP dollars locally will make it a lot easier for people to become farmers. And another big part of that, which rooftop gardens can solve, is land accessibility. So it's very hard for people to get land. And then once you get that land, it's extremely hard for you to keep that land. And that makes it extremely hard to farm when you don't know if you're even going to have your property that year. And an issue that a lot of people face is when you have that uncertainty, it's very hard to invest in those initially to even get yourself up and running at a good pace. So just all of these barriers that are in the way can be solved very easily by some small policy changes, and also by what the solution that we're presenting today, which is more green infrastructure.
And I see, Susanna, I just want to add, Michael said something, policy. And one thing that is very interesting about the Farm Bill, it's called the Farm Bill, but they actually lump subsidies for farmers and SNAP in the Farm Bill, which does that sound right to, it's not, that does not sound right to me. That is just not so again, they're pitting food access and farmers against one another by nature, because why the Farm Bill gets stalled often is because there's, you have people that are advocating for farmers to have more of that. It's only a certain amount of money, right? And so you have people that are advocating for farmers, and then there's people that are, and those two should not be against one another, but that's what ends up happening because they're lumped into the same bill. So I'm done.
I just wanted to speak to your point about needing one person. I think the same thing goes with a lot of urban landscapes that have to do with trees as well, especially at schools. Like I just got a call a couple of days ago from somebody. They're like, we have $1,500 for this school. I won't say the name, but it's a great intention to want to plant trees at the school. But there's so many factors that make it very challenging. And so you need that one person. I think oftentimes it's good to have that person be an AmeriCorps or the person who takes care of the grounds. And you have to include so many people in that process. You can't just like go plant the trees and you haven't told the guy who mows the lawn. Or you haven't figured out where the hose is, where the water source is. So I think when you have a person, like an AmeriCorps is a great person to have for a school or a church or whatnot that has a garden or a tree landscape, because you really do need to tend it. It's one thing if you have beautiful wide open country space where you don't have cars and lawnmowers and all this stuff you have to contend with, and kids, but when you're in an urban space, I'm a 12-year-old, can you tell? But when you're in urban space, it's just so much more challenging, and you really do have to have like the keeper of the trees or the keeper of the garden to deal with all these challenges.
How do we build the ownership, right? Like if we have a steward of the land, we should all feel that sense of ownership over our homes. It all comes down to a lot of conversations, even with just affordable housing. What if we intertwined all these things to allow someone to live in a space if they are a land steward and they could provide a service to the community and it be part of their way to live in the home, right? Like there's so many discussions that can be had. And I have a really good friend, Simone Menache, who Grow on Urban Farms. I don't know if he's here, but he's really having a lot of these discussions. And I think this is the direction we need to go.
We do have some quick questions from Zoom. I don't want to have our Zoom people be left out. So I'm going to ask some quick questions, and then I have a wrap-around question because we do have our keynote where we'll be continuing to have a lot of these conversations around rooftop gardening and all of these great things. So very quick questions. Mina, which fruit trees are native to Louisiana that grow well in the region and that residents can grow in their yards?
I'm going to shout out the Pawpaw, and there's actually the Pawpaw Symposium that is happening in December down at Dockville, so you can get more information on that. I'm going to just shout out the Pawpaw. It's a great local native fruit. It's really delicious. It's so good. Yeah, that's my shout out. Yeah, of course citrus, but
that
I have about 28 fruit trees. Figs, number one.
figs,
yeah, there are Louisiana.
pears. Oh, thank you.
Figs,
Yeah.
there's special figs, the small one. Pears, number two, they do extremely well. Persimmons do very, very well. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of dozen persimmons in my office. You're welcome to come and get some of those.
We will. Yeah.
So, if you have a fence, run a grapevine. I have one about maybe 400 feet already. I get about 60, 70 pounds of grapes out of it.
Oh.
Yes. These are the three major ones which they resist the heat, the humidity, and sometimes lack of water or drought.
For sure. And I
Thank you.
just want to, I'm sorry, Melissa, really quickly, I want, as folks look up, so someone earlier mentioned how we can grow very well here, and we can. And I think sometimes we get what grows well here versus what is native to here a little confused. Like, we mix up the two because a lot can grow here, but it doesn't necessarily mean native just because it can do well here. So you do want to make sure as you're looking for native plants, don't just look for the things that do well here. because it can get a little confusing or blurry lines because we can grow a lot here.
And I have one more quick question. Has there been a study of houses with trees versus those without trees, insurance-wise? Do we know something about that? If not, we need, maybe we do the study, right? Yeah, we are a university, so that is what what we do. And my apologies that we were not able to get to all the Zoom questions, but I wanted to do this wrap-up question that actually relates to a question that was directed at Michael. So I want to also open it up to others. And this has to do, I'm paraphrasing the question to the Zoom question, and my apologies on the exact question. But I wanted us to wrap up because you are doing such an amazing work out there in the community. And it's a twofold question. One is how can organizations in general plug into your work? And one that I do want us to think a little bit more about. Again, we are at the School of Public Health, shorter name. I hope it's okay. We have a lot of resources about not only monetary, research-wise, many things that we can offer. So I wanted also for you to think about how can we as Tulane help in the great work that you're doing with our expertise, everything that we have in the building.
For us at Recirculating Farms, we collaborate with lots of people, a lot of the people who are here, and you just simply have to reach out to us. If there's a point of collaboration, something that we can work on, we are down to work. Collaborating is how we get a lot of things done. Working in a vacuum, you kind of just spin your wheels. You're fighting for the same resources that we can all use to just advance the mission together. So please just reach out to us. We're very accessible. My email was at the end of the thing, and I can share it with Melissa to share with everyone else. You can also find us on social media. We're very active on there, so that's another way to get in touch with us. And then how can we work with Tulane? We would love to work with you all more. We would love to help, like we said, work together and leverage each other's resources to try to address these things in a better way. And something that we have realized as a community is that there isn't a lot of data backing a lot of the things up. And even when it comes down to regenerative growing practices, some people need to be convinced by numbers and data, and we don't really have that. It's a lot of word of mouth and a lot of just, anecdotal evidence that we have right now. So we would love to collaborate more with universities and other people who are interested in solving these issues with us.
I guess, can I speak to that too?
Oh, no, this is for all of you, please.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
We always need volunteers and funding. We all need funding, right? But volunteers between October and March is tree planting season. And so we do occasionally get some Tulane sororities and fraternities, but if y'all could help, spread the word about these volunteer opportunities, that would be great. And also, I think there's some scientific partnerships that could be had. Like we planted 500 cypress, bald and pond cypress on the Greenway in partnership with them. And we were out doing a walk with them and Parks and Parkways and the landscape architects who designed it the other day. And it was very interesting because the first chunk of trees that we planted are smaller than the ones we planted last year. And we guess it's because of the drought. It must be. But that would be really fascinating to do real studies on that instead of it being anecdotal and us just taking a guess. And heat studies would be like not on the trees, but like how the trees are mitigating the heat island effect in our partner communities would be really helpful. And that ties into public health. We could connect asthma rates, et cetera. We just don't have that kind of expertise at our organizations. And I'm sure that would benefit all of us, right? We don't have the expertise or the capacity or the funding to do that kind of work. So I think and stormwater absorption, anything that's related to trees and all of its benefits, but taking it more and Dr. Chalk is flagging me down. I did not know that. But anyway, more data is helpful and we would love to partner with you.
Yeah, and I know we do have some experts, like I'm looking at some of them right here, that we can help with that, definitely. Mina?
Yeah, our organization, as Michael said, and we work together in many different collaborations. But yeah, volunteers are always important at our garden. We have like a group of Chilean students that comes every week. I think a lot of interns too. We have a practicum student right now from the School of Public Health that is with us, which is helpful. They're building out our evaluation for a program. Resources are always important, and we're lucky to have the Tulane Small Center constructing our pavilion actually right now because we're relocating our current community garden to a larger community farm along the Lafitte Greenway. And so they are constructing our pavilion right now. So we're very lucky to be in relation with Tulane, but there can always be more, especially too because a lot of times when I get volunteer inquiries, we have a lot of volunteers. And so what I'll end up doing is like shuffling them to other organizations or smaller entities that need the help in the hands because Sprout tends to be more of a name that pops up when people Google things. And so it's like, comes all the time and I'm like, go help the smaller ones. So, building in students doing research and, can always have like an updated like garden map or farmer map. And then so folks know, and there's just tons of things that could be useful.
You guys hit a lot. I would say absolutely helpful to always have like support and even just synthesizing the data we're constantly collecting. Because we're busy and doing a lot of these projects, doing a lot of this work in the community, and it takes a whole other version of self to exist to also synthesize what we've done. So that could be wildly helpful.
And we love data.
And y'all love data. We love that you love data.
That's a good point because like we've captured data using iTree on all of our trees, but yeah, what to do with it? How to synthesize it? And
digestible for the public as well and make the message clear. Those are all things that I know students also are great at that. So
yeah. Well, thank you so very much, especially for this homework that you've given us. I know that we don't have a formal break, but I want to ask that let's give them a round of applause, but let's do it standing up. So we can stretch our legs. Also, because they do deserve a standing ovation. Come on. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we are going to switch gears now. I am so excited, especially about this conversation again, taking back Michael's last point and main point that green roofs are cool. So we are going to keep exploring the coolness of these green structures. We have here my friend, colleague, Fiona Ural. She is the director of the School of Nutrition and associate director for the Center for Studies in Food Security at Toronto Metropolitan University. Her research focuses on the role of sustainable livelihoods, food systems in food and nutrition security. Her work expands globally, even though she's going to be talking specifically about Toronto. I do want to highlight her expansive work, including recent work increasing availability and access to locally produced fortified complementary foods in northern Vietnam, and past work in Kenya, Uganda, building capacity for sectors in sustainable city region food system policy. And I will say that she is the spark that brought us all together. So thank you so very much. And with that, I'll leave you with Fiona.
I feel like people should meet people who are here. I think we need to take a minute. We got time, right? But first I want to thank the speakers who came before me, oh, geez, get that off there. We have to do these headshots and these roles. I want to thank the speakers for that and for the conversation. There were several themes that jumped out at me. One is we tend to want one solution to a complex problem. We want a simple solution to a complex problem. And I really wish we could get to and instead of, well, this isn't going to work here. So, you know, get to and. Another thing is nothing about us without us. Barring for the disability advocates and activists who say that. Know who your stakeholders are. There's a heck of a lot of community wisdom. Another thing that struck me is vision without resources is a hallucination. I heard that from a World Food Program director once. And then when I researched the origin, of course, it comes from the US military. But it's still a good one, right? We need resources, and it's not just financial. It's social, it's relationship and that. So with that in mind, given that we're trying to get folks to talk to each other, how about you talk to somebody for like a minute that you haven't met before? Here. Just take a minute. You can get up, you can move. Unless y'all know each other. I don't know. This is about meeting people, right? Okay, now I'm looking to Megan, who is the master organizer of this, or mistress organizer of this event. So I'll just bring everybody back and encourage you to continue this conversation at the reception. And knowing that I am the person standing between you and the reception, we should get going. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. And I know that land acknowledgements can be controversial because they can be performative. In this case, I think it's very important for me as a settler who arrived in the work that I'm going to be describing takes place in Toronto. I arrived with my family in the late 60s, and we have benefited more through access to that land than the original signatories of the treaty. And we actually do have a treaty in Toronto. It's the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. And it is not being upheld, but that doesn't mean it can't be. So I use a land acknowledgement as a public declaration of the importance of Indigenous reconciliation and resurgence and the role that all of us have to play in making sure that that happens. It doesn't mean it can't happen. And my colleague Lynn Lavallee talks about resurgence as well. And my colleague Grace Camille Monroe talks about Black excellence, not just anti-Black racism. So I think it's important to look at assets as well. I don't have to talk about this very much, right? You all know this. But I think what I want to, why a university campus? Because each university has a mission, and I looked up Tulane's mission. Enrich capacity to think, learn, act, and lead with integrity and wisdom. So think about the resources. There's human resources, there's physical resources, there's financial resources, there's social resources that universities can bring. So I encourage you to think about how to help the university achieve its mission through partnerships like green infrastructure. And then we've talked a bit about why food growing is part of green infrastructure. I'm continually amazed that the environmental and the food folks don't necessarily talk to one another. There seems to be, I don't get it. I don't understand why, because it's so linked, right? So if it's the Toronto Region Conservation Area who's like, well, we can't have food growing in our parks because that's not natural. Right? Well, it's not. Farming isn't natural in the strictest sense of the word. So it's like, let's get over our little silos and figure out where our common things are. So sustainable food systems, and I think about sustainability, not just environmental, which is what folks go to often, but also social and economic impacts. So a bit about Toronto. I don't know how many of you have been to Toronto. We're the largest city in Canada, about 3 million in the city itself, about 6.5 in the region. Approximately 50% visible minority, which begs the question, why do we use the term minority when it's 51%? But that's another conversation. 51%, including myself, born outside Canada. So it's a diverse community. We're in the downtown core, Toronto Metropolitan University. We were renamed a few years ago from Ryerson. So I've seen all your renaming, and I don't have cards because I haven't got new cards with our new name. We got rid of the name Ryerson because our namesake's theories were used to justify the residential school system in Canada, which took Indigenous children away from their families and opened up to, there's ongoing harms. So we were renamed. But like your school, this campus here, we're right downtown, predominantly commuter campus. And our outdoor growing season is May to October in Toronto because we have our water that we have to deal with is snow and freeze thaw cycles. So it's a little bit different, but it's still water. So I thought maybe if the technology does cooperate, you can see what I'm talking about. Oh, you're not seeing it. Thank you. Speaking of technology, click the right one, Fiona. No. Okay. We will move on. Oh, maybe that's why. I'm seeing it on this screen. That's okay. I'll just have to drag it over.
Let me see if I can.
Okay, I got it. I'm sorry. So essentially, we've had food growing on campus since I joined in 2001. Okay, let's see if I drag this over. Oh, it doesn't matter.
I'm not a tech person. I just play one on TV.
I know. Oh, geez.
All right.
So essentially what we've got is we had an existing green roof because Toronto has a green roof bylaw since 2009 that any new builds or additions over 2,000 square meters or 2,000 square feet has to have, that's okay.
Sure?
I'll leave you. The other thing is for my slides, I've got lots of information on them. So that's because I'm hoping that you can just sit back and listen and don't have to feel like you have to take, oh, sorry, I have to take notes or anything, right? So that you can look up stuff after, so you can watch the video after.
I'm making things worse.
Okay, no problem. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. The Zoom, okay, we'll get. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll speak to the way I've organized today is to think about sustainable livelihoods. So if you think about how food growing green infrastructure can contribute to sustainable livelihoods. So here's the framework. I don't want to get feedback. I am an academic, so it's an occupational hazard. I like a good conceptual framework to organize my thoughts. So just bear with me. But it's been around since the late 80s. It's interdisciplinary. It's equity. It's underpinned by equitable access to assets and capabilities. It's underpinned by a participatory approach, nothing about us without us. So you think about the vulnerability context. So shocks, I've been hearing a lot about shocks, trends in nutrition. We talk about de-skilling with respect to food, seasonality, and how that vulnerability context, what you want to do is build resilience into it. And you do that through transforming structures and processes like the amazing panelists that we had here, organizations, policies, and think about how that interacts with livelihood assets and thinking about human, social, physical, natural, and financial. And I say financial last on purpose, that impact people's livelihood strategies to achieve their livelihood outcomes, including food security and a more sustainable use of the natural resource base. So I just find it as a nice way of organizing, thinking through all the elements that you need. So if we look at our example at Toronto Metropolitan, so I'll say TMU, I know you're TU here, right? So TMU, it all started with a couple of students in our first year nutrition class who said, we want to grow food on campus. And fun fact, one of those students just got hired as an assistant professor and started in September, just by coincidence. So they were worried about de-skilling and food. You know, we've replaced the time that we used to spend cooking with watching other people cook on TV, right? Reduce consumption, and that's, it's not real, right? There's no prep, there's no clean, anyway. Reduce consumption, it's also really hard to do those those food demos, just saying. Reduce consumption of produce for folks who face resource constraints, food insecure populations. And they wanted to foster community on a largely commuter campus, so opportunities for folks to get together. And then in a downtown space where space in itself is at a premium, green space is at a very high premium. So you're lacking in the ecosystem services, which you've heard about, heat island, reducing the heat island effect, biodiversity, carbon sequestration, and also the biophilia, this natural affinity that humans have to interact with nature and living things. So that was the vulnerability context. And then if you think about what we had to draw upon, and that's why it was so beautiful to hear all these folks here, and the people that Melissa has been, Dr. Funster has been talking about, talking to, that can make this into reality. So we have the Center for Studies in Food Security, which was established before I joined the organization, but it provides a platform for collaboration. We have expertise in nutrition and dietetics with sociology, economics, architecture, engineering, professional communications. Our current leadership team is someone from professional communications who works on lunchbox shaming, an architect, and a dietitian from our department. We also had an interdisciplinary certificate for studies in food security. It's a distance program, including an urban ag course series. And the center was able to incubate. So give a place for the students to figure out what to do in consultation. It coincided with the shutdown of a street that cut through our downtown campus to vehicular traffic. And so the university wanted to make sure that we could animate that space. And the Dean of Architecture and Engineering was tasked with that. And we had the architecture folks from the center there who were able to get some money and say, we want to grow food on campus. So this was the first garden. And it was designed by architecture students because, people were worried that food growing would look ugly and messy, right? And it's going to attract pests, right? So we were given a spot right beside the garbage. So it's the urban ag story, right? Disused, abandoned, nobody likes it, and then you make it nice. And then, fun fact, right? Urban form is always changing. It's now a concrete parking pad for bicycles. But that's sustainability. It's biking. Because when we built the new building that I'll show you, that displaced a bunch of rats, right? So then they had to find somewhere to go and they went into the gardens. And we have a safe injection site, Toronto Public Health at the edge of campus. So then there's a lot of needle. So ground level, it gets a bit tricky. And the pilot, of course, became permanent. So once it was shown, anyway, that's just urban ag, right? And then, so facilities identified this place beside the garbage that they wanted to make nicer. And then our central quad is a green roof. There's a recreation center underneath. So there had been some leaks that had been dug up. They didn't know what to do with it. And it happened to be right beside the daycare, the campus daycare. So let's do a learning garden, right? And they also added a farmer's market. So then there could be somewhere where we could sell our produce. We also have the Toronto Food Policy Council and the Toronto Food Strategy, which were located just at the edge of campus as well. And we've worked a lot with them, and their staff were instructors in our certificate as well. And the Toronto Food Strategy in particular was tasked with more sustainable food system for human and planetary health. So to support those initiatives. They facilitated a partnership with a research and innovation center that had a World Food Crops program. So that was to grow foods that were typically imported into Canada that could grow in Canada, so develop those cultivars. And so that was really beautiful on the ground level garden because people would stop by and say, oh, this callaloo, it's about ready to pick. You get it. Oh, I used to grow this in Jamaica. Oh, I used to. So that was just a nice partnership. And then we hosted an Urban Ag Summit on campus. So I'm not saying that you should host another event because I know how much organization goes into any event, but it does raise the profile. So it raised the profile in urban ag, and it also increased registrations in our certificate for food security. So our continuing education group was. So are you getting the theme? What is your objective and where does it overlap with what we want to do? So facilities, what are we going to do with animating this space right beside the garbage? We'll make it into a food garden. We had to tear this up. We've got to figure out what to do with it in the quad. We'll make it into a campus daycare garden. We also have a green roof bylaw. So it was interesting to hear the discussions about load bearing. We have to have load bearing for snow, right? Which is just a form of water. All comes back to water, right? And so any development over 2,000, this is the quad here. This is actually a green roof. And, oh, you can't see the other one. The building's not in the picture. And TMU faculty were key in developing that bylaw with the city. So we actually had a green roof on campus. And again, the condo that was overlooking it when the engineering building was built, we're like, oh, we don't want to look at it. It's got to be pretty. So you got to plant it with daylilies. Okay. And then nobody managed it. So it went to seed. So it was a bunch of weeds. And after Campus Facilities saw that the student initiative was actually doing what they said they were going to do, they said, oh, do you want to go up to the roof? And so they used agroecological regenerative practices, did just put sheets of plastic to stop the existing plant growth, but then they had a growing medium that was rich in organic matter. And they found that they could grow whatever. So that first year was like the test strip, and the second year expanded to the full 10,000 square foot roof. We also had a campaign by students who weren't happy with the food on campus. And it coincided with the existing contract with the food services provider. So it's managed by, I can't remember which, one of the big ones. So they had this campaign. We have a journalism school, so when there's controversies, it tends to show up in the press. And that rattles the administration. So we already had a relationship because of the food growing, and they're like, what? So the VP of operations is like, what do I do? I'm like, well, there's like all these food activists, there's this woman, Joshna Maharaj, who's done work with the Hospital for Sick Children to transform their menu. She could be your executive chef, right? So hired her in with a mandate to integrate more sustainable food into the campus food offerings. And then by that point, the initiative had kind of outgrown the capacity because we're a research center, so we don't have a huge infrastructure for that. So moved over to campus food services to go under there. Outgrew that because it wasn't as much as food services and agriculture you would think. There's different requirements. So then it went in, became its own department within University Business Services. University Business Services is responsible for parking, which is the only thing on campus that makes money, and also runs the bookstore and food services, which both lose money, right? Lose money. They're subsidized. So what I would like to see, I'm just going to pontificate here because I'm in front of my, I've got the microphone. Food is part of the infrastructure of learning. It's part of the infrastructure of living. So we spend money on IT and wireless and all kinds of stuff. But why don't we subsidize food? Or why do we see it as a problem when it's subsidized? We subsidize housing. We subsidize all kinds of things. So anyway, it's interesting. Then there was this new building that was going up, Health Sciences building, that we were going to be going in. Nutrition, the Center for Studies in Food Security were going in. And it just so happened that the manager on at that point, the Ryerson side, had been in continuing education when we introduced the urban ag courses. So she knew about the urban ag courses. And she knew about the food growing on campus. So she's like, hey, let's do a productive green roof because we have to have a green roof because of the bylaw. And then fun fact, this is why you need patience, is because we had all these conversations like 5 years ahead of gaining occupancy. And a couple of years later, we came back and it was a new project manager and there was lots of value engineering happening, which is a nice word for budget cuts. And they'd forgotten everything that we said about a productive green roof. And they're like, we need a solution because this is just too expensive. We said, okay, well, go back, recycle the ideas, right? So now it's promoted by the university as the first purpose-built food growing urban farm under the green roof bylaw. So it's all over the webpage there. And it's devoted to Black food sovereignty and Indigenous healing. So we will see if this works, So I might need Megan to come up and stand beside me to make sure it works. I would like to, so if you scan that QR code, what I'm asking you is what transforming structures and processes And it's just a word cloud, so you just type in whatever. Please don't type in anything too rude because I didn't put any controls on it, and we'll get a nice word cloud. What transforming and structures and processes do you see here in New Orleans? What transforming structures and processes? So what institutions, what organizations, what policies can you see supporting growing food on campus here? Just a hint, perhaps any of the panelists organization? Okay, so let's see. I go out of this. Go to here. Okay. Present. Is it working?
It's going to show up.
So while we wait to see if the technology works, what ideas do you have? Like what struck you from the Sprout? Oh, my gosh, it's working. Okay, student support, Tulane nutrition, recirculating farms, stormwater management, continuing education, incentives. City council, education, city policies, green construction. This looks really cool. I'm
It
sorry you
does.
can't say it, but Tulane food pantry, Tulane Epi. Oh, here, look at that. So you've got ingredients here. Okay, so then if I go back to here, which share screen? This?
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. So now on to capitals. Assets, natural capital. Plants need soil or a growing medium, water and UV. So this is what the rooftop, this is a rooftop, a green roof before it was planted. And that was after 10 years of going to being planted by birds and squirrels. I don't think raccoons get all the way up there. And again, fun fact, urban environment, there's a giant condo being built that's going to shade the gardens. But that's part of urban ag, right? And what does that do? You get to go to the developer and say, you better give us some money. So they're one of the donors to the farm now. Right? Yeah, sure. And the condo who had initially said you have to plant daylilies because we don't want it to be ugly. One of my friends was looking at a unit in that building, and she was told, "Oh, look at you're overlooking the urban farm." So it was sell it. So I guess the message is, if you've got the vision, this is going to happen because people are going to come up with, it's easier to say no to things that are new, even though, to Michael's point, they're reintroducing things that have always been done. It can, if you just stick with it and keep you have to have a long vision for these things, right? Because I'm giving you the highlights. I'm not talking about the as the garden grows drama that happened in the middle, right? But, well, I can tell you about some of that if you want. So there's natural capital. And then there's physical capital. The architecture department happened to have a greenhouse that was being used as a studio and not as a greenhouse. So that was able to be used to grow seedlings, which reduced, so you were able to propagate seedlings, and then to make money selling things, microgreens, which are essentially a little bit past sprout, right? That, how would you describe it? You're the experts. How would you describe a microgreen? There are sprouts that have a bit of the taste, but not the full taste. So you can sprout all kinds of things and sell them for big bucks because people pay for them. We had container gardens as well, repurposed food grade steel drums on concrete pads between the architecture building and the biggest residence on campus. The residents didn't like it because it interfered with their orientation week programming, which happens 1 week a year, right? And then the existing roof, I told you about the pilot where where facilities said, why don't you take over this and see what you can do? And then expanded to the full roof the next. So another lesson is proof of concept. Human capital, students can't say enough. Students say things like, why can't we just? And we can just back off and let them go, right? Because often they will be able to do things that we didn't think were possible. That's my experience. So architecture, and then they can do experiential learning. So the architecture studio on how to design the garden, nutrition students worked with the campus daycare on that garden. Faculty and instructors or subject matter experts can provide guidance and mentorship. Administrators and staff, they think about their mission and how it aligns, and they figure out how to mobilize resources. And community partners, their community wisdom. Because again, back to students, students love working on real world things. They always talk about how, you know, in academia, it's not real, which, okay. I kind of feel like a real person, but that's okay. So they like to work on things, and they will give it their all, right? Social capital. This is where the magic happens, really. All the connections. That's why it took a minute at the beginning just to get you to talk to each other. That's why I'm so thankful I get to come here and see you all instead of just on Zoom and eat fabulous food. Just saying. So we, as faculty members, we have connections to our deans and senior administrators. And we also have partnerships with community organizations if we're community engaged scholars. And the relationship with facilities grew stronger each year once they realized that the initiative could solve some of the problems that they were facing, right? Financial capital, I included, this is the green roof on the engineering building. And I included this because one of the sources of financial capital can be your philanthropic donations. So the folks who paid for or who funded part of the initial green roof then gave another donation, the first six-figure donation, to establish a living lab. Because as the chair of the Police Services Board, you know, first of all, he was all like, why would I give you money for something that doesn't make, that isn't financially viable? And I said, well, because it wasn't designed to be financially viable. That's not what its purpose was. And farming is highly subsidized anyway. And then once we got past that, I said, well, why are you interested in this? And he's like, I'm on the Police Services Board. I can see the potential for this because we have to do things to engage folks and, you know, train in livelihoods, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but then, so the funding has predominantly been from within the university at first. And then once you get produce that you can sell, the model that the farm uses is a third at market prices, a third equitable rates to students, and a third donated. And things like during the pandemic, pivoted the crop plan so it would be foods that would be sturdier and be able to be distributed, right? So you can pivot your crop plan. They will pivot their crop plan again once that condo tower goes up. And that's the beauty of agriculture, is that you learn as you go. These slides will be available, I'm pretty sure. You can do tours, you can do rentals, you can do workshops, and you can do research and charge researchers overhead, right, to use the access farm. So, shall we try this again? What capitals have you got here? Yeah, please. I'm scared. Oh, okay. No. Okay, I'll just read it.
Okay.
Okay. Oh. Yo, did it work? Oh. Oh, okay. Oh, it's not letting me do it. Free trial. We had an institutional license to pull everywhere, but that was only during the pandemic. Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Well, you get the idea. Let's hear. What assets have you got here? Just shout it out and I'll say it into the mic for the folks online. Abandoned space. Sunlight and rain. Passionate students. I would say faculty too. And staff. Farmers market culture. Donors. Got administrators. Your dean supported this.
Organizations that are advocates. There's like a really strong, strong coalition of organizations fighting for it.
A coalition of organizations, and I would add human capital there because there's a lot of expertise and community wisdom. Sense of urgency. Yeah. You got a lot going for you. Visibility because of tourists. And who was I talking to today when I was saying, you know, there's things like the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, and politicians like to brag about their constituents and they like to compete with each other about things. So if you can get someone into, you know, they're going to present at the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact or something, they have to figure out what's being done. And they do like to, they like to have stories to tell. So there's ways of using that competition in a positive way to get your, get engagement. And it's always one of the reasons that I think I'm here is because this is an example of something that has happened. So it is possible. So it's easier to point to proof of concept. And I think that's another thing that universities can do is take away the opportunity costs of experimentation from smaller organizations, entrepreneurs that can ill afford it. You know, the last thing you want to do is grow food that doesn't grow, right? So on a rooftop, there's different conditions. So you have to, someone has to do that work. So who's going to do the work? So what we have is a living lab. And so that was established through a philanthropic donation. So to facilitate research, translate and mobilize knowledge, I heard a lot about knowledge mobilization and knowledge translation that needs to be done. In urban farming in general and rooftop in particular, we used a Delphi process, again, a research methodology developed by the military, as far as I understand, but a lot of our nutrition research has been military associated, like micronutrient deficiencies because sailors were getting, you know, scurvy, etc. So anyway, origin, okay. But can we use it? So that's essentially where you do cycles of interviewing subject matter experts to come up with priorities. So we got the first round, we did priorities for research that the growing community wanted to know about rooftop farming. And then we've had annual, and the first roundtable validated that. The first roundtable was February 2020, which we all know what happened in March. And then subsequent roundtables, imagine the next one was virtual, spoke to the research that took place. So some of the research partnerships we have with the Fashion School, a natural dye network where they're growing foods that can be, or growing crops that can be used for natural dyes, and they do. We've had engineers using sensors to assess stormwater mitigation, like how much runoff. We've had other ones looking at the reduction of the heat island effect, like what plants will reduce the temperature more. And unsurprisingly, again, because often with research we're capturing community wisdom, is tropical plants cool better than non-tropical plants. We've had some policy work. So you can go to our website and see, but it shows you that you can do, if you create it, then it becomes a platform for things to happen. So in addition to student experiential learning, there's also the research that can happen. You can answer questions like people will say, well, what about nutrient runoff? It's a farm. And I'm thinking, do you have any idea what the nutrient runoff is from a conventional farm? Okay. But because it's in a roof, it's not an issue. We use agroecological. I'm saying we in the royal we. I'm not in there. It's the folks that are doing it, but we use agroecological. So it's not an issue. Same with stormwater. 85% of the stormwater, different context than you've got here, but 85% of the stormwater is retained, and it delays what goes to the stormwater system by 6 to 7 hours. And we have had, not to the degree that you've had, but we have had flooding when there's significant rain events. So what we have is a living lab. Then we have, this is another shot, and it's great PR. Like, it's all over all our sustainability stuff for the university. I have academic freedom, right? Because this is going on the web. But just to give you an idea of the production, 40 plus crops, 80 plus cultivars, distributed in 2023, 2,000 kilograms of produce, 32% at market value, 45% donated, and 23% affordable student prices. Established a pollinator garden, and then added a flower garden because that's a good revenue generator, right? Work Bee Wednesdays, so 8 to 10 volunteers from across campus go up there and work. So I see a lot of, you know, employee engagement, employee health and wellness potential here. One of the NGOs in Toronto, Food Share, when they did their good food boxes, they would have corporations come in and have their employees pack the food boxes as a you know, a team building exercise. And so they get the labor, and then they can also hit up the companies for donations as well, right? So there's lots of ways that it's so much more than just the food that's produced. Like, that's obviously I'm biased, nutrition, but it's so much more than that. And I think the folks here know. This is our new rooftop, the DCC building that was occupied in 2019. Again, we know what happened in 2020. So it took until 2021 to open that rooftop. And that was a lot of value engineering, right? But so we have a natural experiment too with the 10 years of plant growth on the other farm, and then the engineers, because you use a different soil substrate up on a roof typically because it's lighter, etc. So the DCC roof is more of a for programming. There's a gathering space for 140 people under a pergola. There's a wash station and primary processing facility that you can also serve food out of. There's a greenhouse. And then there's the Indigenous Healing Garden. So it's Three Sisters Garden. So yeah, you have the Three Sisters here. So the corn grows up, the bean grows around the corn, and the squash shades the corn. And then you make a lovely Three Sisters soup for your harvest party. So again, nothing about us without us, and promoting Indigenous wisdom and traditional ag practices. It's tricky given the history of residential schools, that a lot of folks who went to residential schools were working on growing and working in the kitchen. So the folks that went to those schools, that knowledge has been disrupted as well. So you need to be careful how you do it. But again, we have an Aboriginal Education Council on campus, so you get the right stakeholders and you talk to them. So to your point about, if you plant a tree and you don't engage the person who's cutting the lawn, you're going to be in trouble. So you have to think about who your stakeholders are. Black Food Sovereignty Garden. I'm smiling because Nicole was one of our students and she's now employed and running it. And then Loli is one of those, he's in the back. He's one of those gentle, humble community leaders who's just amazing. He'll just walk up there and go, okay, Nicole, you got to do this, right? You build it and the magic happens. So they have harvest collectives, so you can buy or work to buy the food that's produced there, and they focus on planting crops of cultural significance to the African diaspora. And it's all Black-led, Black-focused programming, underpinned by food literacy, food and social justice, environmental stewardship, and community healing. So school and nutrition, couple floors down, we're an old home ec department, so we've got teaching kitchens, which can be used to do cooking together. There's a summer open farm. So on Wednesdays, people can come up and have their lunch. That's the gathering space there. And again, long view. The shading for the pergolas took 5 years to get in place. Because one of the considerations on a rooftop is things can't blow off, right? So, so what you do is you host, and again, this is going to be on the web, but whatever. You host an event with all the leaders in the university to launch Pride Week or Pride Month, and it's in July, and there's no shade, and they're like, oh, it's too hot up here. There's this structure, but it was value engineered out to put the shade in there, and a couple of years later, it happens. So don't lose faith. Primary processing, and then you can sell and so this was our harvest party. This was, if the photography isn't great, it's because it was me. So you can see how you can serve food up there. So then you could do additional revenue generation of renting it out, right, to folks, obviously on a sliding scale. So I am very interested to see what you do here, what you can do. I found this online. Did you know you had a master space plan? Right? these documents, like you can, it's easy to get cynical about them. Very easy. But you can go to your senior administration and say, you said you were going to do this, right? And it gives you an insight into what the objectives are. So overlapping objectives are important, but compromise as well. It's not always going to be just because you consult with people doesn't mean you can do it that way, right? So there's compromise, it's partnership. I always think of it like dating at the beginning. It's super exciting because it's all about the possibilities. And then you start getting on each other's nerves because of the things that, you know, and then you have to, or whatever, norm, storm, or what's the acronym? Form, storm, norm, perform. When you're creating a group. So you need champions, you need patience, you need vision, you need resources. But from what I can see in the now 24 hours plus a couple hours since I've been here, you got a lot here, a lot. So before I take questions, standing on the shoulders of giants always, the students who ask, why can't we just and have all the energy? The farm staff who make it all happen. My colleagues in academia and civil society committed to community engaged scholarship. Administrators and staff who mobilize the resources. Fellow presenters, what an honor. I had asked Melissa, I said, I should go last because, you know, you don't want the person from away coming in and going, this is what we did. But then I was like, why did I say that? Because I'm so humbled to follow you because you're doing it. And you for, obviously I got my days wrong. I thought it was Friday. You for taking the time in the afternoon and to just think about what can be instead of what can't. Like Melissa said at the beginning, let's think about what can be. So it is, I can't tell you how exciting this has been, this visit. So any questions? Thanks. Yes.
What does the winter look like? Is there a cover crop or does it just pause during the freezes? What happens to the root
They
cover?
they do some cover crop and then they put some they just put hay on top. Yeah.
So I mean,
We have a compost facility up there as well.
mhm.
So there's compost.
Okay, so people are doing so. And what about where is the student? Where are the students during the summer? Because traditionally, I'm sure it's usually fall semester, spring semester. So how do you make sure that that work, whatever student or volunteer or whatnot, what's the program look like to continue maintenance of it through the summer?
Well, increasingly, there's students every semester. There's not as many students in the spring summer semester, but then they can be hired as, so a portion of our tuition goes to a fund that's called Career Boost. And so that is used to subsidize hiring of students. So tuition covers about 50% of the cost of the education, and it goes back into a fund so we can apply for that. So we have Career Boost students, so it gives them full-time summer employment. Yeah. So the university pays a certain amount, and then whoever gets the Career Boost, whether it's a school or a department or whatever, they will supplement it up to the wage rate. Yeah. And there's always staff on campus as well, right? And faculty.
It made me think of the community leader you mentioned, that guy in the
And
back.
then, yeah.
Is he just considered a volunteer that can get up there and work, or is he, umbrellaed under some other agreement?
Well, he's actually a visiting practitioner in the policy school.
Okay, so
for the
he's
year.
faculty.
And
Yeah.
he was associate in the Center for Studies in Food Security.
Okay. Do you
as
ever
well.
have volunteer work come up to the roof that's not umbrellaed under a nonprofit or a school. You see where I'm getting at?
Well, yeah, it's the liability.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the liability is if you're a member of the TMU community,
Mhm.
so then you're covered.
Mm.
And then we have waivers.
Mhm.
So
Okay. Even if you're doing the work and not just visiting it?
visiting, even because it's a rooftop, there's
Mhm.
waivers.
Well, yeah, I'm saying there's
Yeah.
not an extra harsher waiver because you're performing work versus just taking a tour per se.
I would need to check for
Okay.
sure
Okay.
because I don't actually know. But yeah, that's it all goes through risk assessment. This is so much better than my usual classes. Like people are actually asking questions.
Hi,
Hi.
I was wondering if you could talk more about your university's transition to self-operative dining that you referred to on an earlier slide. I was part of a group in undergrad at NYU. We were nearing the end of our contract with like one of the big wigs like Aramark, and we were
Yep.
trying to push towards self-operative dining. And senior administration is like, oh, we love our students thinking critically about all these things, but don't mess with our big business partnerships kind of thing. Gave us all of this I don't know, word salad about we're an urban campus. It's not like we're a land grant university in a rural area where we can just have a giant farm to farm all of our food. And I was like, well, you're colonizing all of New York. You have all of this roof space. Like there's all of this other green space. Like there's all these existing organizations. Like there's ways to support people who are locally doing this work. So I always really appreciate like seeing examples of universities who like actually made that transition. And going back to a question earlier of like, well, what can Tulane do? And I want to like expand that question beyond like Tulane and other universities do is consider like other ways to put urban ag on the map, as in transitioning how you actually nourish your students, your faculty, your staff on your actual campus. So I was just, yeah.
So the food services is still run by, right now it's run by Compass.
Okay.
So what you do is you write into the contract that they have to allow suppliers that are not Sodexo or whoever the big suppliers are. So we had an organization called 100 Miles or 100 Kilometer Foods. So you write it into the contract. And the executive chef is employed by TMU. And our food services won't ever make money because the food service workers are employees of the university and are unionized.
Right.
So they're going to be paid more than the surrounding, like we're right downtown. So it's every kind of fast food and every kind of restaurant you can imagine is within walking distance. But we have a residence population, so we have to provide food for them. So and then there's some catering on campus. So you can write it into the contract. And quite honestly, those big corporations, like I've had several meetings with them, they want to figure out how to do it because they know their customers are demanding it as well. So again, it's proof of concept of how you can do it. Whether the university would open up those contracts and let other people know what's in them,
That's
I don't know if that's going to happen. But you write it into the contract to say we want student run or whatever. So yeah, we have a good relationship with TMU Eats. So there is flexibility, but it is still run by Compass.
interesting.
Yeah.
I guess my question is handling administrators, like at Tulane we have a rainwater garden, and there were a lot of native plants, and this is on the Uptown campus. And over time the maintenance people have gotten rid of a lot of the native plants that were purposely put there. And I guess this kind of goes back to like the rooftop garden y'all initially had, where they planted the lilies and then it wasn't maintained properly, and it came down to people coming together to after letting it overgrow and then come back and then maintain it. What would you do to kind of show administration the value of utilizing those spaces for more than just uh, like street value, like the beauty of it.
I think when it comes to facilities, you have to involve the custodians, right? Like the people who are going to be tending the garden. So what we found was that it enabled a different relationship with facilities workers and students, because typically they're cleaning up your mess, right? And so there can be a real big divide. And they're there for a long time, they're employees, and students come and go. So to give them an opportunity to engage with one another, I mean, I'm sounding really Pollyanna, but it works. And give them a project to work on. People care about food. People care. They have knowledge. They know how to grow stuff. They've grown stuff maybe where they originally came from, or that reminds them of things. So if you can, I think it's about not doing things too, and the administrators are people too. So you have to understand what their job is, right? Like when I was when I serve as chair, my job is to look at the whole department. My dean's job is to look at the whole faculty. And the provost's job is to look at the whole university. So I don't see the things that they see. So it's respecting. It's respecting that everybody's, if you come from a place that people really want to do the right thing, and they just might get stuck somehow, and how to help them get unstuck is the thing. So yeah, if it's going to last and that's one of the reasons I wanted it to go into University Business Services, because we could, if it's in the Center for Studies in Food Security, what happens when I retire, right? Which isn't going to be too long if all goes well. You know, I don't want it to go away. I want it to be there. But then I give up control. So I'm not in charge anymore. So there's give and take all the time. Give and take. That's why politicians sometimes talk like it. Sometimes I feel like a politician, because you have, once you look at all the different competing interests, there's always going to be competing interests. So you have to recognize what they are and help people see your vision. I don't know if I answered that question. It's a hard one.
I'm from the Department of Environmental Health Sciences. I'm very much concerned about the air quality affecting your vegetables, since it is transportation within plus precipitation with contaminants from the air. The plants drink from their leaves, as you know. And so the exposure to these air pollutants, are they affecting the quality of the
So it's a great question.
produce?
We actually had a researcher, a colleague at University of Toronto, who looked at exactly that. And what she found was right after a rainfall, the airborne contaminants were gone. And typically we wash our food before we eat it. So a lot of the airborne contaminants are gone. If it's contaminated soil, which presumably on a roof you don't have to worry about because you're adding the soil when you're building the green roof. Contaminants in soil, it depends where in the plant it concentrates, whether that's the edible portion or not. So I've been involved with work again in Uganda, where water hyacinths were used to clean water. And then the exhaust, once leaded gasoline was eliminated, even the stuff grown on the verge, the roadside, which, because in urban environments, people grow wherever there's space. That was not a problem after lead-based gasoline was gone. So yeah, it's a good question. But we wash our vegetables, and for things like E. coli, if that's an issue, you cook it for 10 minutes. Yeah. The persistent, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're all polluted, right, ourselves. You know, like there's stories, right, of people who are like marathoners have a high contaminant burden just because they eat so much food. So if they get sick quickly and lose a lot of fat, because that's where we store our contaminant, we're all contaminated. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not minimizing that, but I'm just putting it into perspective, right? It's, yeah, the research has shown that it isn't an issue. Yeah. Now, whether the rain has contaminants, I don't know. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the great questions, the great conversation. We are continuing this conversation tomorrow. So please join us at the School of Architecture at Noki, where we'll be having a dialogue answering and addressing a lot of these questions. So we hope to see many of you there tomorrow. It is also a beautiful space overlooking the Sewage and Water Board rooftop. So we're going to get some inspiration as well. So please join us. And those on Zoom that are local, you're also more than welcome to join. I also want to point that we do have a survey that it will be great to get your feedback. Oh, sorry. And please, just the last thing, I want to invite you now to follow us to the beautiful reception that we have. We're going to keep exploring the theme around food insecurity, using beekeeping as a meeting for that. I hear we have some local honey to enjoy and some beautiful food provided by Antidote, and it's actually run by one of our graduates. So really excited about the reception. The party continues, and I'm so sorry, Zoom, that you're gonna miss this next time. Thank you very, very much.